The Tennis Gambling Podcast and the Sports Gambling Podcast Network is brought to you by Fantasy. Sign up with the promo code SGPN to get 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000. And welcome, everybody, to the Tennis Gambling Podcast, the second episode of the day. Time to get into the Women's Australian Open. It's currently 11:30, basically, a.m. Eastern Time here on January 11th. I'm your host, always, Scott Reichel, once again, going solo for this pod. Time to get into the Women's Australian Open. So we're going to preview the actual outrights, not just for the event, for winning the event, but also quarters. We have quarter odds and everything, so we are going to break those down individually as well. Now, we are going to recap what happened in the lock and dog picks, but we already did that in the last episode, so we are going to have some, I'd say, repetition there, but point is going to recap that quickly. So starting off with the actual recap of the lock and dog picks from the last episode, we ended up having a sweep. Ended up having a nice win with Monfils, minus 1.5 games, minus 135, and we also had the winner with the dog. We had Felix and Korda over 2.5 sets at plus 125. Both of those were never in doubt, really never a sweat at all, so nice win there. Plus, we won an outright with Monfils to win Auckland at 16-1, which feels good, and hopefully that outright success carries over into the men's and women's Australian Open. So, nothing else for a recap there, because I already did so in the previous episode. Once again, a reminder, if you're looking for the men's Australian Open, I already did it, so check out the channel. It should be the one right before this one. So time to get into the brief recap, though, of what happened on the women's actual tour over the last week. Most notably, Kessler and Keys winning titles. So getting into the actual path recently, Kessler was able to get the job done there in Hobart as she got the job done in 3 sets against Mertens. She won via bagel in the final set. So she won in straight sets in the first 3 rounds, then had a marathon there against Avanesyan. Okay, I'm going to butcher the name here. Avanesyan ended up winning that one in 3, lost the first set, came back and won, and then beat Mertens there in 3 sets. So nice win for her. I believe she already had a title or 2, but it's nice to add another one to the collection as she got the job done there. Nice job by her. Takes on Zhang in the first round in the Australian Open. She's a minus 300 favorite, so we'll see if she can keep it rolling. Her fatigue will play an issue, but overall a good run for her there, which seemed to come out of nowhere because she lost in the second round in Brisbane, and we kind of thought that she was going to have an average showing here, I guess, in Hobart, but she came through, got the job done, and won a title. Then Keys won a title. Good for her. So the American women kind of cleaned up over the last week. You're looking at her beating Adad Maya in the first round, beat Ostapenko, beat Kasatkina, beat Samsonova, and beat Pegula in the final. So overall, a very impressive path, not just in terms of winning, but a decent competition in every round. And she came through. So nice job by her getting the job done there. 500 event too. So nice job by Keys. Pegula match I'd say it was entertaining. Not that competitive as the match went on, though. Keys won the first set 6-3. Pegula won 6-4 the second set, so you figure, okay, we're going to have a massive, I'd say, war in the third. Not even close. Keys buried her, 1-6-1 in the final set. So overall, Keys had to come back from a set down twice in the event, once against Ostapenko and once against Samsonova, who eventually did retire midway through the third set down 3-0. Good run, though, for Keys. Happy to see her playing well. We'll see if she can carry that over into the Australian Open. She's currently a minus 700 favorite against Lee in the first round. So hopefully, once again, she does make a good run. But the American women played well as they both won titles, and we'll see if any of that carries over into this event. Now, before we get into the actual quarters of the Australian Open, do want to remember once again that you can show support for the show by liking and subscribing on YouTube. And a reminder, you can also leave a rating and a review on Spotify or Apple. So if you want the podcast audio only, we have that too on multiple platforms, including Spotify or Apple. So you can leave some feedback, leave a rating and a review, so you can help support the growth of the show. Plus, a reminder, check out the actual merch store on the SGPN website. We have a lot of great Tennis Gambling Podcast merch. We have sweatshirts, t-shirts, and mugs, all high quality, all affordable. And a reminder, we also have different colors for the shirts, so different options as well. We also have a bunch of shows on the network that have merchandise, not just the tennis show. We have the MLB show. We have the NBA show. We have the college experience, focusing on everything college-related, whether it involves basketball, football, or baseball. So once again, a lot of shows, a lot of merchandise. Check out the merch store to see if you can find something that you do like. Once again, it's all pretty cheap, so you're definitely going to like the options that we have on the merch store. Anyway, a reminder that it is actually the day of the NFL playoffs starting. So a reminder, if you do want to get some picks and opinions on the playoff games, check out the Sports Game Podcast for all of your NFL picks and props. Time to get into, though, the actual outrights for the quarters for the Australian Open. Starting off with the first quarter. I got to go with the recent winners, though, first. I'll do that as I always do. Recent winners, you're looking at Sabalenka, who's owned the event since Barty basically retired. Beat Zhang in the final last year. beat Rybakina in the final a couple years ago. Barty beat Collins. Osaka beat Brady. Ken beat Muguruza. And Osaka beat Kvitova. So for the most part, Sabalenka's been the unbeatable force at this point in the women's tour for hardcourt events, especially in Australia. We'll see if she can get the job done. She's fresh off of a U.S. Open title, so Sabalenka has definitely become the best women's hardcourt player in the world, and I do think that she's a worthy favorite to potentially three-peat in this event. She's also fresh off a title in Brisbane. She's in good form, and we'll see if that can carry over into this event. So starting off with the actual first quarter, this is the Sabalenka quarter. Once again, shop around. I already did all of the shopping around for you. To mention all the books again that I used for line shopping, you have DraftKings, which is the price say that I'm going to be using for this show, at least listing all the odds. I have DraftKings, FanDuel, BetMGM, Caesars, and I also have BetRivers. So once again, I used all 5 books. I line shop. You don't have to. So once again, just keep that in mind. All the odds that I'm going to mention, I did find on one of those 5 sources. So for the first quarter, Sabalenka is minus 165. You have Zhang at 4-1. So a potential rematch, actually, of the final last year in the quarters, which I find kind of fascinating. Now, Andreeva is at 7-1. Schneider is at 12-1. You have Androsva at 25-1. Noskova is 28-1. You have Tausen at 28-1. Vekic is at 30-1, who's kind of the Sabalenka slayer, if you go through their careers. She has a lot more success against Sabalenka than most people do. I'll put it that way. You have Kruger at 30-1. You have Kudermetova at 40-1. You have Buskova at 40-1 too. So you have Noskova and Buskova in the same quarter, which could be a bit tricky. You have Potapova. You have a couple other options, but to be honest, not really going to dive that deep into it. So Sabalenka should win the quarter, if I'm being honest here. She is really, really good on hard court. Once again, defending U.S. Open champion and defending Australian Open champion. So she swept the hard court Grand Slams. She's really tough to beat. She won the title in Brisbane. I can't really go against her at this point. I found 143. I believe this was on BetRivers, so I like the price. I'll go Sabalenka. Not going to overthink it here at minus 143. However, I'm not going to go with her by herself because we know that the women's Grand Slams can be full of chaos out of nowhere. We see it every single year, so I am going to pick other options. I'm not going to just blindly pick Sabalenka and move on to the second quarter. Think that there are some weird things that have happened before in women's tennis, and maybe Sabalenka losing could be one of them. So I am going to mention other options for the quarter anyway, even though I do think Sabalenka will eventually get the job done. So for my second option, I am going to go with the Russian player. The young Russian player has been really good over the last year. I'm going to go Schneider at 23-1. So I think that her odds are solid. Once again, 12-1 on DraftKings. I found 23-1. So shopping around, I found basically 2 times the odds. I could not turn that down. I think that was on FanDuel. I'm pretty sure. Apologies if I got that wrong, but I think FanDuel at 23-1. The price alone is worth it. Now, Schneider is still young. She's kind of unproven. I think she's a solid hardcourt player, though. And I do think that she can definitely make a pretty decent run here based on the path. She has a pretty decent matchup in the first round against Cocchiaretto, who I think she should end up beating. Then she has a matchup against potentially Kruger in the next matchup, then either Vondrosova or Vekic. I think it's a decent path, though. I don't think it's that, I'd say, intimidating. She'd have to face off against Zhang, potentially in the round of 16, but I like her not having to face off against Sabalenka until the quarters. So I do like the overall price and the overall draw for the odds here for a pretty talented young player. And I do think 23-1, once again, has a great, I'd say, has great value to it when you compare it to her price on other books. One book goes rogue, I'm going to capitalize on it. So give me 23-1 for this one. I see Bill asking if I'm covering the women. I do for the Grand Slams. So usually for the Grand Slams I do, and maybe for the occasional 1,000 event, I'll break it down. But for the Grand Slams, I now always do preview episodes for the women's side as well. I see Beantown stopping by. Yep, I definitely am looking forward to the opportunities to make some money here on both the men's and women's sides here for the first round. So first quarter, I have Sabalenka and I have Schneider, but I think I have to do it. I will admit she's been really bad lately, but I called her the Sabalenka Slayer before. She's earned that title. She's beaten Sabalenka before. She also had a very good year last year, and maybe she gets up for the Grand Slam. I found Vekic at 48-1. That's too big. I got to take 48-1. When you have a pretty good head-to-head against Sabalenka, and you also won the Olympic gold medal last year, that was on clay, but still, the point is she had a good season. Like, I think you're looking at a player who is always getting up for these big events, and when she made the semis of Wimbledon last year, made the quarters in the Australian Open 2 years ago, she's been successful in Grand Slams before, and I do think she can look to be motivated after losing the first round of Australia last year. I think she'll be poised for a bounce back here, but she won the gold medal. She made the semis in Wimbledon, made the fourth round of the U.S. Open. I think Vekic is a dangerous player in any Grand Slam. Decent path to, but have to face off against Schneider in the third round, which is not that great. But once again, the other side of the bracket of the quarter compared to Sabalenka. If I can get Schneider or Vekic into the potential quarterfinal matchup against Sabalenka, I like my chances, but I'm going to avoid Sabalenka at all costs with my long shots, and I do think the prices are pretty good. Give me, once again, Sabalenka at -143. Give me Schneider at 23-1, and give me Vekic at 48-1. Once again, a lot more long shot flyers in the quarters of the women's tournament because you tend to see a lot more upsets over the course of the event. So that's going to be my three choices there for the first quarter. Moving on to the second quarter. This is the Gauff quarter. Now, for Gauff, she's around even money. You have Mukova at 550, who's really not been that great lately, to be honest. You have Pegula at 7-1, fresh off the final loss against Keys. You have Badoza at 10-1. You have Osaka at 11-1. You have Samsonova at 16-1. You have Kostyuk at 20-1. You have Fernandez at 22-1. Ostapenko at 22-1. Bencic at 22-1, which is very weird, by the way, because they face off against each other in the first round. So that's definitely the matchup of the first round, Ostapenko against Bencic. But they're both the same odds to win the quarter, which I guess in theory makes sense, but the argument would be whoever's favored to win that match should have worse odds to actually win the quarter. So I find the actual pricing of Ostapenko and Bencic to be a bit puzzling. But I wanted to mention that. You have Mertens, fresh off the final loss to Kessler at 28-1, and that's basically it. If you want to go through some other names here, you have Kennan, former champion, at 50-1. You have Garcia at 50-1, and you kind of get the point. So for the actual, I'd say, form of the main players here, Gauff has been really, really good. Now, Gauff has been a bit of a head case at times. She did make a good run last year, lost in the semis to Sabalenka. So she did make a good run in Australia last year. Maybe she'll be able to get over the finish line in this one. Did win the U.S. Open, of course, in 2023. She made the French Open final in 2022. She's been a good Grand Slam player. The problem is the forehand and the serve especially can self-destruct. The serve can be a catastrophe at times with the double faults, but she made the semis once again last year. She's been good lately. She helped the U.S. in the United Cup. She beat Swiatek, actually, in that event. So I think you're looking at Gauff being worthy of being a favorite, and I found plus 110. I actually took it. Normally, I would probably fade Gauff, but I like the form she's in, and her draw is quite favorable, actually. Now, the problem is she's against Kennan in the first round, but Kennan's not the player she used to be, and I think Gauff will beat her. So, yes, Ken's a former champion. I get all that, but Gauff, I think, is definitely way better at this point. I think she should win. Then probably either Burridge or Jean in the next matchup. Then maybe Fernandez in the third round. But overall, it's really not a bad path for her. You have Mukova. You have Osaka, who's against Garcia, by the way, not an easy match in the first round. Bencic and Ostapenko in the same section. And one of them gets the right to face Gauff. So all those players are going to kill each other, and Gauff gets the scraps. I like her draw quite a bit. I think 110 makes sense, so I'll go with that as my first pick for the quarter. For my second pick, I found Pegula at 9-1. I think it's a great price. Fatigue could be an issue with her losing in the final to, once again, Keys on Saturday. But I think that for a player that made the U.S. Open final at 9-1 to win the quarter, with a pretty good draw, by the way, I think it's a very good price. You're looking at her against Joint in the first round as a wild card, then maybe Mertens in the second round, who she should be favored over by a decent amount. You have Samsonova, who actually withdrew, or I should say retired mid-match against Keys, so she might be injured. We'll see. Point is, though, decent path for Pegula in the first couple rounds, then maybe Badoza in the fourth round, maybe I like the draw quite a bit. She made the U.S. Open final last year. She's a very solid player on hard court. I think 9-1 is a good price, and I do think she can beat Goff if that was a potential matchup. So once again, I think 9-1 is a good price. And I just mentioned her a second ago, I am going to go with Badoza at 16-1. Made a good run in the U.S. Open as well. I understand that female Tsitsipas has not been that great lately in general when it comes to winning Grand Slams or making, I'd say, the final or anything like that. But I think Badoza's got talent, and I do think that her price at 16-1 feels a bit high for a player that is in, I believe, the top 15 at this point in time. She's 16 right now in the world. I think you're looking at a player who can make some noise potentially and should not be underestimated because when she's healthy, she's still very good. The issue is she's never made it past the fourth round of the Australian Open, which can be a bit of a problem. But I think you can make an argument for 16-1 for Badoza. Her overall draw is not that bad. She has Wang in the first round. She's a favorite over. Then either a Sunmez or Gibson should be favored in that one. Maybe Kostyuk in the third round, and then you might have a matchup against Pegula in the fourth round. I think 16-1 is worth something. Point is, though, you get to avoid Goff until the actual quarterfinal matchup. So I'll go with a couple options who I think could take control of the bottom end of that quarter while Goff controls the top. So I'm going to go with 3 picks as well for the second quarter. Before we get into the actual picks for the third and fourth quarter, I want to remember once again that we are brought to you by DraftKings because DraftKings has you covered for the NFL playoffs. Talk about the playoffs. Yes, we are. Get on the action with DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Scoring touchdowns is key to winning in the playoffs. You can win big by betting on touchdowns at DraftKings. Number one place to bet on touchdowns. Ready to place your first bet? Try betting on something simple like a player to score a touchdown. Go to DraftKings Sportsbook's app or the website and make your picks. A reminder, though, great promo. When you do make a new account, new customers can bet $5 to win $200 in bonus bets instantly. Once again, $5 wager to win $200 of bonus bets. Great overall deal. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app. Use code SGP. This code SGP for new customers to get $200 in bonus bets instantly when you just bet $5. DraftKings Sportsbook, the crown is yours.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly on behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas. 21 and over. Age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/audio.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Tennis Gambling Podcast. Just finished going through the first and second quarters of the Australian Open. On the women's side, time to keep it rolling here with the third quarter. So for the third quarter, this is the Rybakina quarter. Now, she's plus 150. You have Keys fresh off the title at 5-1. You have Paolini at 6-1. You have Collins at 11-1. You have Svitolina at 12-1. You have Bolter at 14-1. You have Haddad Maia at 16-1. You have Kudermetova 20-1. You have a couple other options here. If you want to go through some names, you have Sun, who had a pretty good run in Wimbledon last year. She's 30-1. Basically it, to be honest. Didn't really think it was that great of a quarter in terms of depth. So Rybakina, I've been kind of against over the last year or two because she tends to get upset quite a bit. I'd say in either the fourth round or even the quarters. She has not really done a great job of making it to the semis recently in Grand Slams. And now she did make a final here a couple years ago. I get it. She's also had some coaching issues. She stepped away for mental health reasons over the past couple months, or at least the end of last year, I mean. So I don't really trust her current form and mental state enough to actually make a very deep run in this event. I understand if you want to take her. It is a weak quarter. She's still a very solid player on hard court. But I've seen her get upset too many times. She got upset in that crazy final set breaker against Blinkova last year. I'm good. I think I've been pretty on point fading Rybakina in her quarter in the past. I'll go back to it. I think 150 is too cheap. I'm not interested. I'll go elsewhere. So with I'd say the option of skipping the favorite here in Rybakina, you have a lot of potential options here for the quarter. Now, I am going to go with Keys at 5-1. Now, I get fatigue could be an issue because she did just win a title, but I do think her draw is pretty favorable. Keys in the first rounds against Lee, then either Begu or Roos. Then you have maybe Collins in the third round, but Collins has been kind of a mess for the last couple months. I think her draw is really not bad. She might have a matchup against Rybakina in the fourth round, which I think she can handle. Point is, though, I think she could beat Rybakina, and I do like the form she's in. She had a tough overall schedule in the 500 in Brisbane, and she won anyway. I like the form. Keys, I won't pick to win a Grand Slam because she is an inevitable choker, but she can still make the semis and events, and I do think that Keys at 5-1 is a good price if I am skeptical of Rybakina's ability to roll on the table, which I am. Give me Keys at 5-1. For my second choice, I am going to go with Paolini at 6-1. I like her overall game. She had a great year last year, and I think you're looking at a player who's a very good draw. Has a relative unknown in in the first round. Then either Towson, who's mostly a doubles player now, or Zarazua, who I think that she should be favored over. Then maybe Svitolina in the third round, who has really not played much tennis lately. So once again, I think that's a pretty good path for Paolini into the fourth round. Then maybe you get Bolter, who I know has a lot of promise as a potential face of women's tennis in Great Britain. She's been a mess in Grand Slams for most of her career, so she hasn't exactly had a breakthrough run yet. So I don't think she's really a threat to make a deep run until she does so. She might lose to Kudermetova maybe in the second round. Haddad Maya, though, has not been great recently either. Point is, a pretty weak overall draw for Paolini. I think 6-1 is a good price for a player who's proven time and time again she can definitely surprise people. She had a couple great runs last year in Grand Slams. Think that it is a good path for her at 6-1. I think it makes sense. Now, Beantown's mentioning Mukova for the second quarter. The truth is, I thought about Mukova, just to backtrack here for the second quarter. She really has not been playing great lately, and she might have Osaka or Garcia in the second round. I know Osaka, I've mentioned many times on the show, is highly overvalued and overrated because she's priced like it's still her prime, and it's not. But facing off against Osaka in the second round, then maybe Bencic or Ostapenko in the third round, and then maybe facing off against Goff in the fourth round, it's a very tough path for Mukova. So I thought about it. I love her game a lot. She's a great hardcourt player when healthy. That is a very tough path. You go Ostapenko. Once again, you have a chance of going against Osaka in the second round, then maybe Bencic or Ostapenko in the third, and then Goff in the fourth. That is really tough. And I thought the odds weren't, I'd say, reflective of how tough the path actually was. So I skipped Mukova based on the draw. I would have taken her if she was in a better spot on the bracket, but unfortunately for her, she's not. So I skipped over Mukova into that quarter. But anyway, for the third quarter, once again, Paolini's draw is very favorable. I like her odds, and I think that 6-1 is a good price. I'll go with her as my other choice for the third quarter. Moving on to the fourth quarter, this is the Swiatek quarter. So for this one, Swiatek is the favorite at about -120. You have Navarro at 10-1, who made a good run in the U.S. Open last year. You have Raducanu at 12-1, who's still living off the reputation of winning the U.S. Open a couple of years ago, but really has not done anything since. You have Kasatkina at 14-1. You have Putintseva at around 16-1. You have Jabeur at 16-1, who historically has been really bad in Australia, by the way. So Jabeur has not really done anything worth a damn in Australia in the past. You have Sakari at around 18-1, whose career's kind of fallen off a cliff over the last year or so. You have Anisimova at around 20-1, Azarenka at 20-1. You have Kalinskaya at 22-1, Stearns 28-1, Alexandrova at 35-1. You kind of get the point. Kessler, though, fresh off the title, is 35-1 as well. So for this one, you're looking at Swiatek, who's been fine. Did end up losing to Goff in the United Cup, but overall, she's still a solid player. Now, the problem for Swiatek, recently, she has not been that good in the Australian Open. In fact, she's been upset quite a bit. So the question is, do I think that she'll be able to actually get the job done in this quarter for once? The point is, I think it's a pretty good draw for her, and I had a hard time finding players I actually trusted to make a deep run. I'll give you an example. I thought about Navarro. Thought it was an obvious choice because she made a deep run in the U.S. Open last year. She's been horrible since the U.S. Open. So I had a hard time actually taking Navarro, and she's against Stearns in the first round, which is a very tough matchup. She's only like -137 on the money line in the first round. So Navarro's overall first round matchup was very difficult, and her form has not been good. So I really just couldn't take her. I thought the odds weren't good enough, so I ended up skipping over on Navarro. Swiatek, though, said before, did end up losing to Goff in straight sets in the United Cup, though. Did beat Rybakina, did beat Bolter, did beat Mukova. She played well, just ended up losing to Goff. So she has been good on hard court recently. I think she can look good here. Swiatek, though, for reference, has not made the semis in 5 of her 6 appearances in the Australian Open. So she's only won her quarter one time here in the past, but she made the 3rd round last year, 4th round the year prior. So not the best of showings, but the point is I do think the draw is pretty favorable for her, and I think the price is okay. I got minus 110. If you wanted to go against Swiatek, I can understand it because, once again, she has only made the semis one time in the Australian Open in her career. So I get it. But her draw is, once again, really, really nice. She's against Siniakova in the 1st round, then potentially Volinets in the 2nd round, then maybe Alexandrova or Raducanu, maybe. But you also have Anisimova, so those 3 might kill each other. I think Swiatek would win against any of those players. You're looking at what could be a 4th-round matchup against Azarenka, who's past her prime, maybe Kalinskaya, who has not been good lately either. Point is, you know what I'm trying to say. Like, her path into a potential quarterfinal feels very, very easy, and I do think that minus 110 is a good price for a player who, even though she's underachieved lately in Australia, her path suggests she'll be a massive moneyline favorite in basically all of these matches. I'll go minus 110. Think it's a good price. Now, once again, I'm skipping over Navarro. Her 1st-round match against Stearns is a problem, and she has not been that good lately based on form. Raducanu, I don't trust at all. She hasn't done anything since winning the U.S. Open as, once again, one of the bigger, I'd say, Cinderella stories of all time in tennis. But I just don't trust her to actually make deep runs. So I'm not going to take her. Kasatkina, I didn't want to take either. I didn't see many options. But Jabeur, I said before, is really bad in Australia, historically speaking. I can't take Sakari, who's been really bad for a year. Azarenka's past her prime. Anisimova, I didn't want to take. So once again, not many great options in this quarter. Thought it was the weakest quarter of all 4. But I am going to go with another option just in case Swiatek does end up falling short. And for this one, I am going to go with a player who I think can make some noise. The path is okay. Not an amazing path, but I think that she can make some noise here. I'm going to go with Putintseva, who I think can make a pretty good run here at 16-1. The problem is you have Kessler in the 2nd round, who maybe is going to be fatigued after winning the 250 over the past week, so maybe that's a thing. But her draw is not bad. She has just to go through it in order. She has Avanesian in the 1st round, then Kessler maybe in the 2nd round, then potentially going up against Kasatkina in the 3rd round, who's not been very good lately. Then maybe you end up getting Navarro, who could get upset. Maybe Sakari could get upset by Osorio in the 1st round. So once again, I think the path's okay for her, and I think you're looking at a player who can maybe make a run if her game is actually firing, and I do think that she can find a certain gear that makes her a threat at 16-1. I get if you want to potentially go against her, but I do think that her overall form actually makes her kind of appealing in this one. To go through her actual form recently on the tour, she ended up having an appearance in Adelaide. She ended up, I actually said Brisbane before. I meant Adelaide. A point is, though, you're looking at, I meant for Keys. Keys had a good run there in Adelaide. But the point is, she ended up beating Vekic. She beat Jabeur, ended up beating Schneider, and then she lost to Pegula in the next matchup. So she's been really, really good lately, at least for that event. I mean, once again, that's a pretty good path. And she was able to make it into a respectable, I'd say, finish of that tournament. But beating Vekic and Jabeur in straight sets and beating Schneider in 3 and then losing to Pegula competitively, 7-6, 7-6-6-3. I like her form. I think she's entering Australian Open tennis in good form. I think 16-1 is a good price, and I think that because of that, I'm going to go with her as my final pick for the 4th quarter. So once again, on my picks here for the quarters, the 1st quarter, I'm going to go with Sabalenka at minus 143. I'll go with Schneider at 23-1, and I'll go with Vekic at 48-1. For the 2nd quarter, I'll go with Goff at 110. I'll go with Pegula at 9-1, and I will go with Badoza at 16-1. 3rd quarter, I'm going to go with Keys at 5-1 and Paolini at 6-1. I will fade Rybakina in her quarter. For the 4th one, I'll go with Swiatek at minus 110, and I'll go with Putintseva at 16-1. Fresh off a good showing in Adelaide. That's going to wrap it up, though, for the quarters. Time to move on to the outrights to win the actual event. So getting into the actual outrights here, you have Sabalenka at plus 240. You have Goff at 5-1. You have Swiatek at 5-1 as well. You have Rybakina at 10-1. You have Zhang at 15-1. Andreeva at 30-1. You have Mukova at 30-1 as well. You have Osaka at 40-1. You have Navarro 50-1. Keys 50-1. Pegula 50-1. You have Paolini at 60-1. Raducanu 70-1. Badoza 80-1. Jabeur 80-1. Vondrousova 80-1. Schneider 80-1. You kind of get the point from there. So for the actual outrights, first of all, I'm obviously going to take the, I'd say, given choice, and I have to do it. Give me Sabalenka again at 240. I can't go against it. Two-time defending champion. She's been great on hard court. She's the best hard court player on the women's side by far. I got to take her. I think that 240 for a very favorable draw makes sense. Now, a matchup against Goff in the second round could be, in the semis, could be tricky, but I do think that Sabalenka is better. She beat Goff in the semis last year. I think that it's a very good draw for her, and I do think that unless she gets upset by Vekic, who has kind of owned her in her career, and Vekic has been in, I'd say, poor form recently, I'm just taking her for the price. I think Sabalenka has a pretty straightforward path to getting a third title in a row in Australia, or at least making a very deep run. So I'll go with her at plus 240. Then we're going to go with Goff at 5-1. I like her form, beats Swiatek in the United Cup, who is in good form too, and Goff, I do think, can definitely make a name of, I should say, I'll put it this way. I think that she has been a name that I've mentioned constantly in the negative as being a bit of an overvalued commodity in Grand Slams, who won one U.S. Open title. She's one of the favorites every year in every other event, and she never wins. However, she made the semis last year, lost to Sabalenka, and she's playing great tennis right now. Seems like the forehand is under control. The serving can still be an issue. Double faulting is a problem, so that definitely can be, I'd say, an issue that she's going to have to fix at some point in her career. But she did make a very, very respectable run in the WTA finals last year. In fact, she won the entire tournament despite losing a match to Krejcikova in the round-robin stage, beat Zhang in the final, beat Sabalenka in the WTA finals. So she did win the most recent meeting against Sabalenka. So I think that once again, you're looking at a player who's playing good tennis. She is still a very talented player, and it seems like she's kind of finding her overall consistency on the hard court to go with her talent. 5-1 I like. I'll go with that as my other choice here for the favorites. Now we skip the middle portion for odds, and we go right to the long shot. So once again, Sabalenka and Goff will be the favorite picks that we have for low odds. Now we move on into the long shots. I will go with Pegula at plus 5,000. Mostly on principle, I think you're looking at a player who made the final of a 500 this past week. Did lose to Keys, but the point is she did beat a couple good opponents there, made a good run. She made the U.S. Open final last year. She's objectively a very good hardcourt player. Is she elite on hardcourt? No. But if you make a U.S. Open final and now you're plus 5,000 to win the event, I'm going to take you because you've proven that you can make deep runs in Grand Slams on hardcourt, and I do think it's a good path for her. Now, I am going to admit it is not the easiest path because you do have Goff in the quarter and you have Sabalenka in the semis. So it is not the easiest path, but plus 5,000, I think, is a very good price for a top 5, top 10 player in the world. I'll go with her at 50-1. And for my last choice, I am going to go with Paolini at 60-1. Kind of the similar argument to Pegula, where I just think based on her talent and overall skill, I think 60-1 is disrespectful. Now, unlike Pegula, her quarter, I think, is very, I'd say, doable. And I do think that her path is quite favorable. I mentioned it before. So 60-1 for a player who made the Grand Slam final twice last year. Not on hard court. It was on, once again, clay and on grass. The fact is, Paolini, I know, has the stamina and the mental toughness to deal with adversity and to make deep runs in Grand Slams. But 60-1 for a player who I think has, once again, a quite favorable draw. I'm fading Rybakina anyway. Keys maybe has some fatigue issues, who knows, and she's a bit of a choker in her career. But Paolini has proven that despite being pretty short and despite not having a great serve, she finds ways to win matches, and I do think that's a trait you need to get the job done. 60-1 for basically a top 10 player in the world, though, I think is also a disrespectful line. I'll go with that as my last pick for the outright. So once again, for my picks to win the event, I'll go with Sabalenka at plus 240, Goff at 5-1. I'll go with Pegula at 50-1, and give me Paolini to wrap it up at 60 to 1. That's going to wrap it up, though, for my outrights. Now it's time for the lock and dog picks. But for that, though, I want to remember once again that we are brought to you by Fantasy because they have a lot of great items in their pick menu. They have a lot of ways to make money as well. They have Profit Boost. They have Give Me Pick'ems, a reminder. They have the Playoff Best Ball contest, which is now live. The Gauntlet Tournament has $2 million in prizes up for grabs for just a $25 entry. They have a lot of great items on the pick menus, too. From different sports, you have NFL, college football, college basketball, MMA, NBA, NASCAR, tennis, even esports. You could go use specials and boost on Netflix entries. For my entry, I will go with Russell Wilson higher, half interception in the game against the Ravens on Saturday. He has been pretty bad against the Ravens. He's thrown a pick in both regular season meetings. Ravens have had at least one interception 4 straight games. I think you're looking at a good spot for Wilson to throw a pick in this game. Reminder, though, when you do make your new account, use the code SGPN. The code special get a first-time deposit offer up to 1K bonus cash on the fantasy promo code SGPN. Welcome back, everyone, to the Tennis Game Podcast. Just finished going through the quarters and the overall outrights for the event. Now it's time for the lock and dog for the first round. For the lock, I'm going to go to the matchup between Snigor, and I am going to go with that matchup against Collins. I am going to go with the dog here. I'm going to go with Snigor at plus 4.5 games here at minus 110. I think this line is absolutely insane. I understand the argument that Snigor's a relatively unproven player, but Collins has been atrocious for the last couple of months. In fact, Collins has quietly lost 6 straight matches, and she's not covered a 4.5 game spread since the Olympics last year, since July. So she has not covered a line like this in basically 5+ months, and now she's laying 4.5 despite not winning any matches for the last couple months. This price is absurd. Now, Snigor went through qualifying. She looked good. She only dropped 1 set. So I get the argument you're taking an unknown qualifier who might be a bit, I'd say, nervous in the spot. But it's mostly based on fading Collins here. If you lose 6 straight matches and you're laying 4.5, I'm going to fade you. Like, that's a crazy price to be laying. I get that Collins had a great year to start last year, kind of unraveled late. But the point is Collins, I think, is overvalued based on her name and her reputation. But if you're in bad form and I can get 4.5 games fading you, I'm going to do it. So I'll give me Snigor plus 4.5 games here at minus 110 as my lock. For my dog, I am going to go to the matchup I mentioned before between Navarro and Stearns. Should be a fun matchup. It is priced very closely for the money line on the books, even though Navarro is a top 8 player in the world. The point is, though, I'm going to go with the over 2.5 sets in this matchup at plus 130. Navarro is ranked 8th in the world, and yet she's only minus 137. In this matchup, so you're expecting a bit of a war based on how the prices are currently located for these players. And now Stearns has been involved in a couple marathons lately. 3 of her last 4 matches have gone to 3 sets. So once again, you are looking at Stearns, who's been a bit of a marathon woman recently. I can see that happening again. And they faced off multiple times in their careers. 3 of the 5 career meetings in the head-to-head have gone to 3 sets. But simply put, you're going to give me a top-tier player in Navarro who made a good run in the U.S. Open final last year, who's been in bad form lately. She's only minus 137. The head-to-head's been very close. I see an absolute war here between 2 solid ralliers from the baseline. Give me the over 2.5 sets at plus 130 as my dog. So once again, the plays here for the lock and dog picks. The lock's going to be on Snigor plus the 4.5 games against Collins at minus 110. For the dog, I am going to go with Navarro and Stearns over 2.5 sets at plus 130. A reminder, if you want some extra picks for the first round, check out the men's episode for the Australian Open. I have a bonus lock and dog pick there too, as well as quarter picks, etc. Till next time. You can find me on Twitter at Reichel Radio. Find me on the NBA show. Find me on the MLB show. A reminder, back once again for the second round of the men's side for the Australian Open in about a couple days. Till then, though, good luck to all of you and all of your bets. Bye, everyone.